Started. For whatever reason, my computer doesn't want to cooperate. Thank you. All right. We are continuing with our FI Connect series. This is the third session in the series that Tricia and I have offered to high school teachers. When we designed the FI Connect's approach, we wanted to provide context and information for teachers that are research-based. They are designed specifically for you based on what you are telling us you need in light of the ever-changing situation we're facing day to day. We certainly want the sessions to be inclusive and, again, informal and relaxed. We are using Zoom as our platform. We do have, I believe, everybody on mute. At any time, if you want to answer a question, participate specifically in a part of the conversation, feel free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, if you have questions, you want to make comments, you want to ask for some additional support, please put that information in your chat. Participants' videos are minimized, and you can adjust according to the little buttons at the top of the block as to how you want those to appear on your screen. You may double click the screen to go full screen, and then you can escape to come back to your regular viewing. At any time, if you have any questions about Zoom, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat, and either Tricia or myself can address it. For right now, in the chat window, we would love it if you would share a song title that captures how you are feeling right now. And I will get it started with Ain't No Mountain High Enough. How about Others? I am feeling in that kind of mood today. It's the end of the world as we know. Oh, Susan, I have heard that song so many times in the last 2.5 weeks. Our neighborhood at 5 o'clock every day, we try at 5 o'clock every day to come to the end of our driveway, and we either have somebody controlling music on the radio or playing the guitar, and we've tried a couple of times to sing that song. We will survive. Yes, indeed. Only the strong survive. Everyone needs a shoulder to cry on. Everyone needs a friend to rely on, most definitely during this time. I love the fact that I will survive or we will survive has come to the forefront. The beat goes on every single day. Thank you for being here. I love it. I guess that's why they call it the blues. Great. Great titles. We hope that maybe by the end of this session that mood might shift a little bit one way or another. We're going to see all of the work that we've done today to put together to share with you. We certainly based it on our last session and the conversation that came out of that session and the comments that you have made. Welcome to the jungle. Yes, Jenna, that is a great one. Love that. Learning is a process and not a location. Today's focus is on the 4 C's, and both Tricia and I are going to talk with you about some cautions, connections, considerations, and some compassions to have during this time.
Okay, I'm going to begin and end it. So right now it's kind of be a little bit gloomsday, but I swear I will end this on a good note when I come back and talk about compassion. So normally when we talk about the 4 C's, it's about collaboration, communication, but we changed this around a little bit to really focus on the 4 C's as they relate to us being in different places in remote learning, whether that is if you're paper only, if you're doing asynchronous or synchronous instruction. Just wanted to bring about some cautions because I know classroom management could still be an issue in this space. So I wanted to talk about that first before we went on to any of the other C's. So one thing is to set your rules and expectations. Now that the dust has settled a little bit more, we're beginning to understand how to work in this environment, you may want to take time out, especially if you're doing something that is synchronous. So you're online with your students, to set your expectations. This might be a reminder of what you already were doing in your physical classroom, but it's also good to remind them of how they need to act in this space. Just a side note, I listened to a podcast called Small Town Murder, and the co-host said that his son got kicked out of his virtual school because he attended class with no shirt on. So while he thought that was perfectly normal, because he was at home, really reminding students of some expectations. So some examples of expectations, like with the podcast example, was dress code. I mean, granted, I am wearing a sweatshirt, but because I am at home, just remind them of dress code. You may want to remind students or tell students how, when, and where they can ask questions. We have everyone muted on Zoom whenever they come in. If you're using Zoom, if you're using Google Hangout, or if it's asynchronous, if I'm a student, I have a question, where can I ask that question? How do I work with others in that? What happens when I get disconnected? This might be for the younger students, not understanding I got disconnected, I need to get connected back. It's not enough to just say I couldn't do it. I call these private questions that are just for the teacher, not for the group. How and when do I ask those private questions? And then unfortunately, we're going to be facing more and more with people being bullied online. How do I report that? There's no principal's office anymore. So when and how do I report that cyberbullying? And at any point in time, if you wanted to jump in to ask questions, we're manning the chat, so go ahead and do it. So just for an example, if you were using Zoom, which I think some school districts are moving towards Zoom, some are moving away from Zoom and doing their own things. This is just an example of looking behind the scenes at whatever platform that you are using to see what restrictions you might need to have in place. You know your students best. Your students may be able to handle, not having any restrictions, or, there's always maybe that one that you have to think about. So for instance, in Zoom, when I went behind the scenes in Zoom and I went under the settings and under basic, there's a way that if you wanted to, you could restrict, right there, right around there, you could restrict that they could only, if they sent us something in the chat, only you would be able to see it. So by checking off that box, that would make that. In the next slide, it's on the same screen that is in Zoom under settings. At the bottom, this isn't necessarily classroom management. It's related to classroom management, but if you had students with some type of special needs, you see down here at the bottom there, you could have closed captioning going on so that they would be able to follow along, at least with the words that were happening. So if it's a recording, they could go back and really read the words that are there. So that is a feature that's in Zoom. So whatever platform you use, I just highly, highly encourage you to go behind the scenes to see what's happening. How private is the private chat? So you could send, in Zoom, you could send messages to one another. Which, we're all adults, that's fine. I could send a message to Susan and only Susan could see it. Me, as the facilitator, I can't see those private ones. Unless I went afterwards to maybe look at the chats, I can't see that Susan is sending Josh a message. So to me, that's how private it is. Hopefully that answers your question. Also, when it talked about, see, now they're being a little bit funny in there. That's okay. So also, just something to think about is, how do you set up those questions? Email may not be the best way to field all the questions, especially if students are asking the same question over and over again. So if you will have access to these slides. So Emmy, if you click on that link right there, it'll force you to make a copy. And this is just an example of maybe the whole entire class has a place where students can pose questions. Maybe you restrict it to you are the only person who answers those questions. Maybe you give a couple of students who are, kind of your high flyers an opportunity to say, okay, I want you three to go ahead and answer these questions, or you open it up to the entire classroom. It's just a simple table, but that way, if they all have the same questions, they're able to look here first. It's kind of like that ask three, then me, but ask the Google Doc and then me, just to field some of those things. Point number 2 under cautions or classroom management, is to try to establish as much as you can, because I think we're going to be here, unfortunately, for a couple of weeks, is try to establish some kind of a routine, some kind of procedures that you had before, that you have now, or that you're adopting that are new, that are very simple. Even if students are getting a packet from you every week, maybe that packet has a schedule of what the learning is going to look like, what their expectations are. Maybe it has some type of Monday motivation on there. Maybe it's the same thing that we did. What's your favorite song? What happened over the weekend that you were really proud of? Or be cautious if you ask this, what's the best Netflix show that you just watched? Some type of routine, because students do like some routine, especially now that everything is so uncertain and their lives are so restricted. So just some things to think about when we talk about establishing some kind of routine. And then I think the last one is, there's always one or two. I don't see this happening with the entire class, but once again, whatever you had in place in class can still be in place now, but be on the active side of anticipating some things that may happen. So if you are in a place where you can quickly turn the video off, if you have that shirtless person show up, you know that everybody can be muted. Also, you can restrict access in Zoom. You can restrict your access to no one can join the class until you, the host, has joined the class. No one can join the class after a certain amount of time. All of those things are in the settings. Also, be prepared to think about how assignments are structured. If they can simply Google the answers, they will. So we might have to deal with plagiarism. So maybe also think about having some open-ended, very short, but open-ended work to reduce the possible plagiarism that could happen.
The second C in our 4 C's is connections. And parents, students, and teachers need to be in continual conversation and continually connected throughout this process, especially as things we know are changing hour by hour, most certainly day by day. How are you connecting with your parents? We know you're doing outreach to your students, but how are you connecting with your parents? Because in this state, they are in need of as much support as the students are. Oops. Some more connections. We came across this material from Lexington County Schools or Lexington Public Schools, and some suggestions for how connections can continue in light of the current situation. Certainly being mindful of time. We do know that we're not able to hold regular school in session from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 7:30 to 3 p.m. So it's important to realize up front that the learning time is going to be reduced given everything else that's going on within student lives. Certainly their emotional and mental health needs to be taken into consideration. And Tricia and I talked about that quite a bit in both our first and second sessions. We brought that up again in our last week's session. Parents aren't teachers. I'm sure some of you have already come across some parents who have outright said, I don't know how to help my child. I am not equipped at home to teach them. I am having to go out to work, or I am having to do other things that require my attention and my child can't have my full attention. So we can't expect the parents to be teachers, but we can provide them some support, knowing that the student learning needs to continue. I think by saying this, we all are fully aware of the gaps that have already been in existence with our students, and most certainly the situation at hand has only increased the widening of those gaps, hopefully making folks far more aware of the educational inequities that are in this particular situation. Certainly, weekly goals. Tricia shared with you a little bit of an idea about putting a chart together to make sure there was some consistency in place, and assignments that are provided for students really do need to be flexible. And I know that several folks, I'm not sure about everybody in this particular webinar, but several folks in my educational circle have made comments of the fact that work is not being graded. There is no formal assessment taking place, or are students going to take it seriously? That is something certainly we all need to keep at the forefront of what we can be doing to push the learning as each day passes and also make it interesting and fun. Utilize siblings, in particular with high school students. This is the high school session. Our students may have older siblings that are in college and that are home, or even younger siblings where they can utilize the work that's being provided to use them as part of the solution to whatever may be provided as a possible assignment or problem. We want to try to limit new content. We realize that not all of our students have access to the internet, to a computer during this time. And by giving others content, enabling them to move ahead, again, goes back to that widening of the inequities gap. So learning should really reinforce and practice the previously taught curriculum. Feedback and communication is obviously extremely important. How to build that into lessons so that you as the instructor are continuously being provided with what is the student doing that is successful, and what is the student doing that perhaps needs more work, and then structuring additional lessons to provide that extended support that they might need in areas that they've identified as needing more help. Again, I just mentioned students that don't have connectivity, who don't have access to a computer. What are we utilizing to try to best support those students? Telephoning. A lot of our students, I came across a piece of research actually yesterday that indicated the very high number of high school students who may not have internet access at home, but they most certainly have a cell phone in their possession. So how to best utilize that particular device in helping them continue with their learning. Driving by students' houses. I know in my own neighborhood, we have a large majority of elementary school age children. I know that those of you who have been here before have heard me say that. And we have had just about every week carloads of teachers riding by, holding out signs, honking in front of the students' houses, getting them to come outside on the porch to just say, hey, we're here, or to hand off a packet of work if the student were to not have access. So it's important, again, to do whatever we can possibly do to keep the learning in place. The third C is considerations. We've now done cautions, we've done connections. What are some things that we need to consider? How can we make lemonade out of lemons? What about giving students some fun to do along with their content-based learning? What about a content-related challenge that they can complete at home with whatever materials that they have available? And this assignment could be a writing assignment, something that they needed to build, something they needed to explore, certainly around the confines or their home, or if the student were able to get out and have a break and walk in a park, what are some things they can observe? And you can make the lesson fun and exciting for them. Other considerations, and we gave some tips about lesson planning and activities in last Wednesday's session. So what are some things that you could try now, try next week, or try a bit later? So one particular thing you could try right now is setting up the means to send out a weekly or daily email blast or send a text message to your students. For next week, can you build a virtual classroom journal where students could definitely work on their writing during this time of confinement? Or a bit later, set up a classroom chat via text message or Twitter, or utilize a discussion board where you and your students can continue to make ongoing connections during this time. Other things, office hours. It would be really, really beneficial, particularly at the high school level, if teachers could set up designated times during the day or even during the week where their students have the freedom to check in with them, ask questions. It may be just a check-in to say, hey, how are you? What are you doing? Again, maintaining those connections. Virtual field trip. There are so many resources and so many sites available where you can take the class or individuals on a field trip and utilize that as part of the lesson. And then also one thing to consider, because we have focused so much on flexibility and grace, is writing notes of gratitude and appreciation. Again, can students write a note of gratitude, make a list to people that they want to write to, and make this part of an assignment? Write to their principal, write to their superintendent. Again, trying very diligently to keep the skill set in place during these ever-changing times of teaching.
Okay, I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly because, of course, this is when people decide to do landscaping. So there's like people with leaf blowers and lawn mowers outside. So hopefully they've moved on from my area. The last C is compassion. I heard something on NPR that just reminded me that we are not all in the same place. So just two compassions to consider as we wrap up our 4 C's is students' home life. I'm sure that I am not the only person that knows someone who has lost their job, though it's temporary. A friend of mine did lose her job. I know exactly how that feels to lose a job. And it's almost like a death because it's unexpected and all of a sudden your life is completely different. So just know that some students may be dealing with a parent who is extremely stressed out, or parents who are extremely stressed out because all of a sudden they are unemployed like thousands of other people, and waiting for unemployment in an environment where there's a lot more people who are filing for unemployment can be very stressful. Or pay cuts if you are still employed. Thank you, Michelle. Even still can add stresses. So not everyone may be able to get on to office hours whenever they can get on to office hours, or they may not have that, ideal home life that you see in B, where mom is right there to help her out as she's sipping on some tea. So just take that into consideration, especially, some of you already said you're reaching out to students all the time. Your TAs are reaching out to students, and it's, you don't want it to be an invasion of privacy to say, hey, what's happening there? But your high school students will openly share. So just kind of like keep that in mind, that we have to be a little bit more flexible, as someone just put in a chat, with deadlines, that lives have been changed and lives are going to continue to change and be stressful, and no one can leave these 4 walls for that long. So just kind of like be considerate of that. The next one.
Oh, sorry. John, you make an excellent point. I wanted to mention this, Tricia, before you go on, about space. A lot of folks are confined in a very tight, cramped space, and there is no quiet place to sit down and think and do work. And again, we have to be compassionate and flexible about that issue. It's a huge issue.
And then access. I mean, we've had discussions, heard discussions about not every child having access. I know in some counties, they are making it happen to be one-to-one. Some of the high schoolers, or most of the high schoolers, would have at least a cell phone. So just consider that if a child is using a phone, which they do, to learn, think about what they can see on a screen. So I was a CTE teacher, and way back when I first started teaching computer applications, there was a 7 and 7 rule. And the rule was, it's an old rule, just one full disclosure, it's old, no more than 7 words across or 7 lines down. If a student is looking at, if you have slides or a PowerPoint, think about what that will look like on a phone. While that might be more slides than you want, the information will be a point where they can read it. I am trying to be way more ADA compliant, and ADA compliance means using Arial font. Not really interesting, but for the eyes, it makes it very easy to read. So just be aware that the smallest possible device they might be reading on. You agree with the rule, Andrea? I don't know if it's still there, but think about the smallest possible device they might be reading it on. Can't fit all those words.
Yep.
On here. Next one. So to wrap up our session, Emmy wanted to add as much fun in as possible. So how are you feeling right now? You're loving this new normal, and if that is you, I really need for you to explain the new normal that you are loving. You're hanging in there, you're completely stressed out, or you've checked out, you're just like, whatever. Remember, this chat is just between us. So go ahead and type it in, or you can be creative, and if you have type it in. How are you feeling right now?
Hanging in there. Excellent. Yes.
Yes. More than one option, Michelle. We'll give people 15 more seconds to chime in. Love getting sleep. Okay. Laura, I am with you on that. So I was listening today. There are some points. It was an astronaut who's used to being isolated, up in space. There are some really good points for us to actually have to slow down. Oh my gosh, Susan, staying motivated is extremely difficult for me.
Yes.
Especially when you're at home, you're like, I could just sit on the couch and watch Netflix and just be fine. But we have work to do. You still follow the 7 and 7 rule? Okay.
Oh, yes, Marie.
A teenager is feeling right now, especially a teenager who is missing prom and graduation and all those other significant events that happen that you're waiting for as a senior, and it's not going to happen for you. Although my senior graduation got rained out, so that also happens. Yes, I think they are bad. Okay.
Yes. Laura, you're right. Some kids are mad, but I've also seen a ton of my parent friends of high school seniors doing their own rant on behalf of their teenager about everything they're going to miss. Oh, yes. Many students are caregivers.
That goes back to that compassion and realizing that there is no time off for some of them.
Most definitely.
So this recording, along with the other 3, can be found right here on that bit.ly link. They're all on YouTube. Once again, you will have access to this, so you could either take a picture of it or just wait for us to give you the bit.ly link to the slides. Okay, I need to move this out of my way. So Emmy is going to place the link to the slides in the chat. so that you will be able to access them at any point in time that you want.
I will get, hold on, I'm sorry. Whoops.
See, she made me do this last week and I was panicking at this point. I was like, we did a fancy thing. Just give me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna place that in there.
There you go. There you go.
You did it?
I did it. It's in the chat.
In the chat. All right. So access to it. There's also just a couple of things before we end. There is also a slow chat happening, which I didn't know what a slow chat was. It's kind of like a asynchronous chat happening on Twitter that you are welcome to participate in. And we ask you to complete, and Emmy will once again place that link into the chat. Yeah, you see how fun it was last week?
Yes, I do. And
she will play.
As I said, this is a learning experience for everyone.
The link is not in chat.
Oops.
And just label each one so they'll know which one.
There you go. Sorry, Lisa.
Please fill out this survey. This survey will have some questions on there because the FI chats will look a little different as we move forward. So we highly encourage you to take a couple of minutes to complete it. They still do not see it.
Okay.
So while she's doing that, I will give you some waiting music. Yeah, she's sending it to everybody.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, Marie. Hold on one second. It's still not coming up.
I'll get it.